Bloomberg Audio Studios. Podcasts, radio, news.
This is your weekly Washington Policy Pulse on the Balance of Power podcast. I'm Joe Matthew. Every Monday, Bloomberg Intelligence senior policy analyst and friend of the show, Nathan Dean, shares his weekly call on upcoming catalysts in the nation's capital. Listen for the most recent and relevant policy research from our team at Bloomberg Intelligence. Now with today's installment, here's Nathan Dean.
Welcome to the Washington Policy Pulse. Again, welcome to those of you who are coming to us via the Balance of Power podcast. We always appreciate you listening via that record as well. We've got a lot of interesting things. I honestly thought today was going to be a fairly light day just because it's Thanksgiving week here in Washington. But we actually got quite a bit of stuff happening. So I'm going to run through just a couple of the more minor items, and then we're going to turn to Dwayne Wright, our senior healthcare policy analyst, to talk about what's going on in the Obamacare space. So just real briefly, just what for other things that are going on. We've talked in the past about this idea of a $13 billion farm aid package. Secretary Rollins, the agricultural secretary, was just on Fox News about an hour ago and said that that package would come the week after Thanksgiving next week. So obviously, you know, the general rule of thumb that we like to joke about is that everything in Washington, whether it's a holiday party or any type of legislative action or anything like that, usually happens in the first week of December. By the second week of December, folks want to go home. That's usually when the regulators start taking up stuff, and then by the third week of December, everybody's out. So generally speaking, that first week of December, you're going to expect some headlines. I also want to talk a little bit about what's happening over the Commodity Futures Trading Commission. So this is that small regulator that doesn't have as much public exposure as the SEC does, but it's very, very powerful for those of you who are in the derivatives and the crypto space. So, you know, just last week, the Senate Agricultural Committee had a hearing for Mike Selig to be the next chairman of the CFTC. The Senate Ag Committee actually then voted on his nomination the day next. I think he'll be passed and become chairman sometime in early December. But, you know, we're going to have new leadership over the CFTC. Now, what does that mean? I just put a note this morning, and it largely means the status quo. I mean, so, you know, there hasn't been a lot happening over at the CFTC at the moment. They only have one individual who's leading it. That's acting Chairman Caroline Pham. But, you know, the CFTC had received a lot more power from Dodd-Frank and took authority over the swap markets and has authority over the futures markets and so forth. But the industry has largely just been in this status quo at the moment, just because there really hasn't been all that much tinkering with these rules, really hasn't been any changes to these rules, and I don't anticipate that happening anytime soon. So if you're looking at the CME or the ICE world, really that regulatory framework is going to stick around. If you're looking at the swaps rule from one of the banks, that regulatory requirement is really going to stick around. The one caveat of this is cryptocurrency. And obviously, Acting Chair Pham has been doing some work with, Chairman Atkins over at the SEC on crypto, and that's going to continue. Now, Mike Selig comes from the Chairman Atkins camp. He's actually a special advisor over at the SEC. He understands crypto. I think he understands a little bit of the CME and ICE world as well. So I think it's going to be one of those picks that ultimately is just going to allow the CFTC to continue without much disruption or change. So again, we'll see what happens. But I think, you know, his confirmation will come in early December. Other things to go on is for those of you who are in the defense space, the NDAA language was supposed to be out by Thanksgiving. The House Armed Services Committee Chairman, Mike Rogers, has come out and said, now look for December 1st for that language. It looks like there's still just a little bit of haggling over that $32 billion that we talked about in last week's call. Again, in the artificial intelligence space, at 4 o'clock today Eastern, President Trump is anticipated to sign that executive order on artificial intelligence. I want to bring up Matt Schettenhelm's piece real quick, because Matt wrote about this just last week when the news broke that there was going to be an executive order. And the headline of his note it says, Trump probably can't block state AI laws without Congress. So this executive order most likely will be to say, look, any state that implements a law restricting or constraining artificial intelligence is going to face funding fights or funding cuts, et cetera. Matt's whole point here is that unless Congress passes a law on those points, such actions will most likely probably falter in court. So again, keep that in mind as you see the headlines later today. And then finally, for those of you who are in the financial services space, the banks. The FDIC is going to finalize the enhanced supplementary leverage ratio tomorrow at 10 a.m. The Federal Reserve is reported to be finalizing it around the same time. There was a little bit of trickery in my words going on here. It's because generally you need to have 7 days to have a Sunshine Act notice. What happens is you put out a notice saying that we're going to have a meeting within 7 days. In rare instances, you don't have to follow that, and it looks like the FDIC considered this to be a rare exception to that. So tomorrow at 10 a.m., look for the language to be out sometime within the 15, 20 minutes after that. So I know many of you who are on the fixed income side care about this in terms of the impact of the treasury markets. But remember, this actually takes the ESLR, which was at 5%, lowers it to 3 plus 50% of a GSIB surcharge. You're looking around 3.4 to 4.3, depending on the bank. And the proposed rule and the final rule will most likely exclude treasuries from does not exclude treasuries from the denominator. May have just made a big mistake there. Does not exclude treasuries from the denominator of that rule. So, okay, with all that being said, I want to bring in Dwayne Wright because we've actually had a lot of stuff happening right now in the healthcare space. And this is all geared towards Obamacare subsidies. So, Dwayne, you put out a REACT this morning. Can you tell us why did you put that REACT out and what did it say?
Yeah, so thanks, Nathan. And to your earlier point, hoping for a quiet week starting off the Monday with quite a bit of news. So the gist of it is, and I think we probably saw some hints of this yesterday during some news or press conference or on one of the weekly shows. The president, I guess there are rumors, it's been reported by Bloomberg that we will see the White House make a proposal that would extend the Obamacare subsidies for 2 years. And it would do a whole host of other things that would address some of the concerns from Republicans, which would be to cap the eligibility of those subsidies to people at a certain income. Right now, if you are over 400%, if you make over 400% of the federal poverty level, which is about $62,000 a year, your premiums are capped at 8.5% of your income. And so it would, as reported, cap the eligibility of those making under 700% of the federal poverty level, which is still roughly $110,000 a year for an individual. The other piece of this is to limit the availability of these so-called zero premium options. What the enhanced subsidies did, which is it's a Biden era proposal or expansion of the ACA, is it essentially made these premiums pretty much zero for people making about around 150% of the federal poverty level. And so getting rid of those so that there's some contribution, which many Republicans have said has led to an increase in fraud. And quite interestingly, that's where we've seen the biggest increase in enrollment, which is on that lower end of the enrollment scale. And then there's also some reporting that we'll see some tie-in with health savings accounts, which is has long been a Republican priority, which is to expand the availability of these under the premise that if you give people more control over their health care, one, it would reduce healthcare utilization as if people are more in charge of their own dollars, but also just give people more flexibility in how they spend their resources. So those seem to be the key pieces of that proposal. And of course, we'll be looking forward to more details on that.
How do you think the Democrats would respond to that?
Well, absent the details, I think Democrats had already been on board with income relating the subsidies moving forward. We've seen a handful of Democrats either come out with some income limit that's right around 700% of the poverty level, but we did see one of the first bipartisan bills actually go back to the pre-Biden era change. So I think there's a lot of receptivity to it. And when you think about the fact that 7% of the 24 million enrollees have annual income above 400% of the poverty level, it's not an insignificant number of people, but it's enough where you can see the Democrats kind of coming on board. Now, I think the HSA piece will be a big question mark, as they've long opposed it, but I think we'll need to see the details to get a better sense of that. The bigger question will be on the lower end of the income scale. If we're getting rid of the $0 premium option, well, what is that amount? Is it going back to where it was before the change? Is it somewhere in between? And so I think that'll be a question, but it is trending in the right direction. And this was always a big question for us. I think we were largely skeptical of an extension, number one, but believe that if Trump pivoted in response to what we saw in the off-year elections and overall polling over the past several months, not just general polling, but specific polling from Republican pollsters, that Trump and Republican supporters favor an extension. If Trump bought into that, if the White House bought into that and believed that there were some significant downsides to next year's midterms, that this would pretty much seal the deal. But again, whatever is going to be proposed has to be something that's not necessarily including any poison pills that Democrats might not support or it just would find unfavorable.
Great. So I'm going to ask one more question, but again, if you have any questions for Dwayne, feel free to put those in the chat. But my last question is, and I think that you've already alluded to this, is that if President Trump comes out with this plan and says this is his plan, he'll be able to pretty much push those House Republicans who are against any idea of a subsidy increase to come on board. Is that your view?
He still has pretty significant sway over the caucus, and tend to think that it would be enough to sway enough of the Senate Republicans to get something to the 60 vote threshold, and would then create additional momentum to get something through the House. So, I've always believed that a bill could pass the House. It just wouldn't necessarily have a majority support of the Republican caucus. And I think if he does jump on board and Democrats are there, then this is something that can get there. So I would be more optimistic that it does happen. But again, let's see what happens in terms of the details. But I will say it's interesting. I was looking ahead to that big question of will there be a shutdown in January? And if this was not resolved, could this be one of those areas? I think you and I have been skeptical that there would be a shutdown after these Democrats in the Senate switch sides, that they wouldn't then switch sides again to not support another CR. This would pretty much make the likelihood, barring something else happening, make the likelihood of that pretty much close to zero.
Yeah, I'm still skeptical as well, but full disclosure, I got it wrong, and I owed a lot of people. Actually, 5 folks came in for Bloomberg coffees that I had to give because of the shutdown. But
good thing they're free.
Yes, that's it. The best coffee for the price point. So, Dwayne, thank you very much. For the rest of you, happy Thanksgiving this week. To our American followers, to our non-American followers, happy Thanksgiving to you as well. President Trump is scheduled to go to Mar-a-Lago tomorrow afternoon. So if you're thinking of timing of other actions, tomorrow afternoon, he has the turkey pardoning. According to the poll, it's Gobble and Waddle this year are the 2 turkeys that will be pardoned. Fun fact, they're actually staying the night at the Willard Hotel like they always do. So with that, I want to say thank you again. We really appreciate it, and have a wonderful week, and we'll talk again soon.
Our thanks to Nathan Dean, Bloomberg Intelligence Senior Policy Analyst, bringing you the latest installment of his weekly Washington Policy Pulse. For more from BI or to join this call live each week, you can email Nathan at ndean@bloomberg.net. That's NDEAN@bloomberg.net. And come back to the podcast later today for the latest edition of Balance of Power.